You are not aging because of time. You are aging because your vessels are quietly losing their freedom. And this process does not announce itself with pain or warning. It accumulates silently, day after day, until one morning, a person who felt normal faces a diagnosis that changes everything. I have seen this too many times. A strong man who worked his whole life, a woman who cared for everyone except herself, both convinced that if nothing hurts, everything is fine. And then suddenly, dizziness, pressure spikes, memory lapses, or worse. When we examine them, we find the same thing. Arteries that are no longer elastic, narrowed by what we call plaques. But here is what is important, and I want you to really hear this. These plaques are not just fat stuck in the vessels, as many people think. They are living structures. They grow, they become inflamed, they harden, and they disrupt the delicate inner lining of your arteries. This lining is called the endothelium. It is one cell thick, just one, and yet it determines whether your blood flows smoothly or struggles through narrowed passages. When this lining is damaged, your body tries to repair it, but instead of restoring youth, it builds layers. Cholesterol, calcium, inflammatory cells, all of this accumulates like scale inside a pipe, and slowly, without noise, your circulation changes. Now think about this. Your brain depends on constant, uninterrupted blood flow. Your heart does not tolerate shortages. Your legs, your memory, your energy, all of it is tied to how freely blood moves through your vessels. And yet most people believe that after a certain age, this is inevitable. That nothing can be done except taking medications and hoping for the best. Medications, including statins, do have their place. I prescribe them when necessary, but in practice, I also see something else. I see that certain natural components of nutrition can influence the condition of vessels in a way that surprises even experienced specialists. Not by magic, not overnight, but steadily, deeply, and in some cases more gently than medications. Today, I want to talk to you about two such products. Not exotic, not expensive, not hidden behind complicated names. Simple things, accessible, but used incorrectly or underestimated by most people. And I will tell you honestly, the second one, which I will reveal at the very end, is the one that many people overlook completely. Even those who carefully monitor their health often miss it, and yet its effect on vascular health is something I have observed repeatedly over the years. Before we go further, let me ask you something simple, but important. When was the last time you thought not about your symptoms, but about your vessels themselves? Not about pressure numbers, not about cholesterol in isolation, but about the condition of the very roads through which your life flows. Take a moment and answer this for yourself, because from this point forward, what we discuss is not theory. It is something you can begin to apply as early as tomorrow morning, and if you value clear, honest explanations without unnecessary complexity, support this work, subscribe to the channel, and leave a like. This helps more people hear information that can truly change the course of their health. And now, as we continue this conversation, it becomes necessary to look at the first element, something that does not act loudly, does not give immediate sensations, but quietly changes the internal environment of your vessels in a way that even modern cardiology respects more and more every year. And when we begin to look deeper into what actually protects the inner surface of your vessels, we inevitably come to a substance that your body produces itself, but with age begins to lose: nitric oxide. It is not something abstract. It is a real, measurable molecule that tells your arteries to relax, to widen, to allow blood to flow freely without resistance. In younger years, this system works almost flawlessly. The inner lining of the vessels responds quickly, producing enough nitric oxide to keep circulation smooth. But after 50, and especially after 60, this production decreases. The vessels become more rigid, their response slows down, and this is where the foundation for plaque formation is laid. And now I want to bring your attention to something surprisingly simple, a product that many people associate only with digestion or diet food, but in reality it has a direct connection to nitric oxide and vascular health. Beetroot. Not as a garnish, not as an occasional salad ingredient, but as a regular, intentional part of your routine. Beetroot contains natural nitrates. When you consume them, your body converts them step by step into nitric oxide. This is not a theoretical idea. Clinical studies have shown that even a single portion of beetroot juice can measurably improve endothelial function, that very thin inner layer of your vessels we spoke about earlier. I remember a patient, a man of 68, calm, disciplined, but skeptical. He had mild hypertension and early signs of atherosclerosis. Nothing dramatic, but enough to raise concern. He was already on standard therapy, but his vascular elasticity remained poor. We introduced a simple habit: half a glass of fresh beetroot juice in the morning, 5 days a week. No miracles, no promises, just consistency. After several weeks, his blood pressure stabilized more smoothly, without sharp fluctuations. He himself described it in very simple words. It feels like something inside is no longer tight. And when we repeated the examination, we saw improved endothelial response. This is how it works, quietly, without noise. But there is something important you must understand. Beetroot does not clean plaques like a brush cleans a surface. That is a dangerous simplification. What it does is much more intelligent. It improves the environment inside your vessels so that new damage slows down, inflammation decreases, and the progression of plaques becomes less aggressive. And over time, this changes the entire trajectory. Now, let me give you something practical. Tomorrow morning, do not change your whole life. Just start small. Take fresh beetroot, prepare a small portion of juice, about 100 to 150 milliliters. Drink it not in a hurry, but calmly. If the taste is too strong, you can dilute it slightly with water or add a bit of carrot. Do this for 7 days. Do not expect fireworks. Pay attention to subtler things. How stable is your pressure? How does your head feel when you stand up? Is there less heaviness, less internal tension? Your body speaks quietly. You just need to listen. And one more nuance that many overlook. Beetroot works best when your mouth bacteria are intact. Antibacterial mouthwashes used excessively can disrupt this process because part of the nitrate conversion begins right in the oral cavity. This is a small detail, but it shows how interconnected everything in your body is. So we are not talking about a product. We are talking about restoring a pathway that your body once used naturally. And as this understanding deepens, it becomes clear that improving blood flow is only one side of the process. Because even if the vessels begin to relax, there is another silent mechanism that determines whether plaques grow, stabilize, or begin to regress. It is more hidden, less discussed, but far more powerful than most people imagine. And this is where the next element begins to reveal itself. And when blood flow begins to recover, when vessels regain even a small part of their flexibility, many people feel relief and think that this is already enough. But this is where I have to gently but firmly correct that impression, because plaques do not form only from poor flow. They grow where there is chronic, quiet inflammation, not the kind that gives you fever or pain, but the kind that lives in the background for years. This inflammation is subtle. It does not ask for attention, but it constantly irritates the inner wall of your vessels, making it vulnerable. And when this happens, even normal cholesterol can begin to behave differently, accumulating where it should not. So we come to the second layer of understanding. It is not enough to widen vessels. We must calm this hidden inflammation. And here we move closer to the second product I mentioned earlier, the one that many people underestimate, even those who carefully monitor their diet. But before naming it, I want you to feel the logic. Imagine your vessels as a road. Beetroot helps to remove the tension from that road, making traffic smoother. But if the surface itself is damaged, cracked, constantly irritated, even smooth traffic will not solve the deeper problem. The road will continue to deteriorate. Now think about what can soothe this surface from within. In my practice, I often observe people who eat correctly by general standards, but still have progressing atherosclerosis. When we analyze deeper, we find a common pattern: a lack of certain compounds that regulate inflammation at the cellular level. One woman, 71 years old, came with complaints of fatigue and unstable pressure. She followed all classic recommendations, took her medications, avoided obvious harmful foods, but her markers of inflammation remained elevated. Not critically, but persistently. We introduced a very simple addition to her daily routine. No drastic changes, no strict diets. Just one consistent element, which I will name in a moment. After 6 weeks, her subjective state improved first. She described it as lighter inside, which is a phrase patients often use when inflammation decreases, even if they cannot explain it scientifically. Then we saw objective changes. Her inflammatory markers decreased, her lipid profile became more balanced, and, most importantly, her vascular condition stopped worsening. Now, I will say it directly. This product is fatty fish. Not in rare portions, not as an occasional dish on holidays, but as a regular, thoughtful inclusion in your week. Mackerel, sardines, salmon, herring. These are not just foods. They are carriers of omega-3 fatty acids, which have a profound effect on inflammation. Omega-3 works differently from most things people try. It does not suppress symptoms, it integrates into the membranes of your cells. It changes how your body responds to irritation, how it regulates inflammation, how stable your plaques become. And this is a key point that many do not understand. The most dangerous plaques are not always the largest ones. The most dangerous are unstable plaques, those prone to rupture. When they rupture, this is what leads to heart attacks and strokes. Omega-3 fatty acids help stabilize these plaques. They make them less aggressive, less likely to break. This is not a promise. This is physiology. And now a simple action for you. Within the next 7 days, include fatty fish at least 3 times. Do not overcomplicate it. It can be baked, lightly salted, or even high-quality canned fish in its own juice. The key is regularity. Pay attention again not to dramatic changes, but to subtle signals. Your energy after meals. Your clarity of thought. Your sense of internal calm. Because when inflammation decreases, people often say the same thing. I feel more steady. And now, I want to ask you something. How often do you think about inflammation in your body when nothing hurts? Most people do not think about it at all, and yet it is one of the main processes that determines how you age. If this way of explaining helps you see your health more clearly, support this conversation. Subscribe and leave a like. It matters because it allows more people to understand what is usually left unsaid. And as we move further, it becomes important to connect these two elements together. Because improving blood flow and reducing inflammation are not separate actions. They interact, they amplify each other, and when this combination begins to work, something even more interesting happens inside the vessels. Something that changes not just their condition, but their behavior over time. And when these two processes begin to work together, when the vessels are no longer in constant tension and the inner irritation gradually calms down, a subtle but very important shift occurs. It is not visible on the outside, but inside your body the balance begins to change. The vessel wall stops defending itself so aggressively, and instead of constant damage and repair, a quieter, more stable state emerges. This is the moment many people miss, because they expect a sharp improvement, something obvious, something they can point to and say, "Here, this is the result." But in vascular health, the most valuable changes are often the quietest ones. Think about it this way. For years, maybe decades, your vessels have been adapting to unfavorable conditions. They have learned to function under pressure, under inflammation, under reduced flexibility. And now, when you begin to give them a different environment, they do not immediately become young. They begin to relearn. This relearning requires one more condition that is often underestimated: consistency of signals. Your body does not respond to occasional efforts. It responds to patterns. I have seen patients who take excellent care of themselves for 2 or 3 days and then return to old habits for a week. And then they tell me, "It doesn't work." But the body is not confused. It simply follows the dominant pattern. There was a man, 62 years old, very intelligent, very well read. He knew everything about cholesterol, about pressure, about risks, but his actions were inconsistent. One week he followed all recommendations, the next he abandoned them completely. His condition remained unstable. We did not add new medications, we did not complicate his regimen. We focused on one thing: stability, the same simple actions repeated calmly without emotional swings. Beetroot in the morning, fatty fish several times a week. No extremes. After 2 months, his results changed more than in the previous 2 years. This is not because the method was new. It is because the signal became continuous. Now I want you to feel this idea clearly. Your vessels are not waiting for something extraordinary. They are waiting for predictability, for a steady environment in which they can stop reacting to constant threats. And here we come to another layer that strengthens everything we have discussed. Because even if you introduce the right products, even if you begin to reduce inflammation and improve blood flow, there is a factor that can either support this process or quietly undo it. This factor is how your body handles sugar. I am not talking only about sweets. I am talking about glucose fluctuations in general. After 50, the sensitivity of your cells to insulin often decreases. This means that sugar stays in the blood longer than it should, and when this happens, it damages the same delicate inner lining of your vessels. This process is called glycation. Without going into complex terms, it is when excess sugar binds to proteins and makes them rigid, dysfunctional. The vessel wall becomes less flexible, more prone to damage, more attractive for plaque formation. And this is why some people, even without very high cholesterol, still develop atherosclerosis. So now you begin to see the full picture. It is not one cause, not one solution. It is an interaction of processes. And here is a small step you can take starting tomorrow. After your main meal, do not sit down immediately. Give your body 10 minutes of calm movement. Not exercise, not strain, just walking. This simple action helps your muscles use glucose more effectively, preventing sharp spikes in blood sugar. It seems almost too simple, but in physiology, simple does not mean weak. Try this for 7 days. Observe not only your digestion, but also your overall state. Many people notice that they feel less heaviness, more clarity, even better sleep. Because when sugar is stable, the entire internal environment becomes calmer. And now, as these elements begin to align, improved flow, reduced inflammation, more stable glucose, the body receives something it has not felt for a long time: balance. And it is exactly in this state that deeper recovery processes can begin. Not forced, not artificial, but natural. And there is one more element, often ignored, which determines whether this balance will hold or quietly slip away again. And when this internal balance begins to appear, when the vessels are no longer constantly irritated and the blood moves more freely, many people experience a strange sensation. Not dramatic, not loud, but noticeable. They say, "I feel calmer inside, even physically." This is not imagination. This is the nervous system responding to improved circulation and reduced inflammatory signals. But here is where I need to draw your attention to something that is often overlooked even by disciplined people. The body can begin to restore itself, and at the same time, you may unknowingly interrupt this process every single day. This interruption comes from chronic tension. Not necessarily emotional in the obvious sense. Not always stress that you can clearly name, but a background state of internal strain that keeps your vessels slightly constricted, your hormones slightly elevated, your recovery slightly incomplete. You see, your arteries are not just tubes. They are living structures controlled by your nervous system. When you are tense, even subtly, your vessels receive a constant signal to narrow. And even if you eat correctly, even if you support your body with the right products, this signal can reduce the effect. I have seen patients with excellent diets, with good laboratory results, but with persistent vascular tension. When we look deeper, we find the same pattern. They are always on alert. Even at rest, their body does not fully relax. There was a patient, a woman of 65, very responsible, very organized. She followed all recommendations precisely, but her pressure remained unstable, especially in the evening, not dangerously high, but fluctuating. We did not change her diet. We did not add new medications. We added something that at first seemed almost too simple to matter. Breathing. Not random breathing, not just relax, but a specific slow rhythm that signals safety to the nervous system. Inhale calmly through the nose, slow and steady, then a longer, softer exhale. And again, 5 minutes in the evening, every day. After 2 weeks, she told me something very characteristic. Even before the numbers changed, I felt that my body stopped resisting itself. This is a very precise description, because when your nervous system calms down, your vessels receive permission to relax. Blood flow improves not by force, but by removal of unnecessary tension. And here is the connection you must understand. Beetroot supports the chemical pathway of vessel relaxation. Fatty fish reduces inflammation and stabilizes structures, but your nervous system determines whether these processes are allowed to fully unfold. Now I want you to try something tomorrow evening. Sit comfortably. No distractions, no television, just 5 minutes. Inhale slowly through your nose for a count of 4. Then exhale gently for a count of 6. Do not force it. Let it be natural. Do this for 7 days. Observe not only your mood, but your body, how your chest feels, how your head feels, how your sleep changes. Because often, the first sign of improvement is not in numbers but in sensation, a sense that something inside has become quieter, and this quiet is not emptiness. It is a state in which your body finally begins to repair instead of constantly reacting. Now, as we move deeper, it becomes clear that we are not dealing with separate actions. We are building an environment, an internal environment in which vessels are no longer under constant pressure, no longer inflamed, no longer rigid. And in this environment, something very important begins to happen with the plaques themselves, not in the way people imagine, not as a sudden disappearance, but as a gradual change in their behavior, their stability, their interaction with blood flow. And this brings us to a point that many people never hear about. But once you understand it, your entire perception of vascular health changes. And when this environment truly begins to change, when the vessels are more relaxed, inflammation is quieter, sugar is more stable, and the nervous system no longer keeps the body in constant tension, something very important happens to the plaques themselves. Not something dramatic, not something you would feel immediately, but something far more valuable. They become stable. Most people are afraid of plaques as if they are ticking time bombs simply because they exist. But in reality, the greatest danger is not always their size. It is their instability. A soft, inflamed plaque can rupture, and when it ruptures, the body reacts instantly by forming a clot. This is how heart attacks and strokes often occur, suddenly, unexpectedly. But when the internal environment improves, plaques begin to calm down. They become more fibrous, more stable, less likely to rupture. This is one of the most important protective mechanisms your body can achieve. And here is where I want you to clearly understand something that is often misunderstood. We are not fighting plaques directly. We are changing the conditions in which they exist. This is a more intelligent, more physiological approach. In my practice, I have followed patients over years, not weeks, and I have seen how those who consistently support their vascular environment experience something remarkable. Their condition does not just stop worsening. It becomes predictable, manageable, and in some cases even shows signs of regression. There was a man, 70 years old, with confirmed atherosclerosis of the carotid arteries. Not critical, but significant. He was afraid, as many are, because he had read about risks. We did not promise miracles. We built a system. Regular intake of nitrate-rich foods, stable inclusion of omega-3 sources, gentle daily movement after meals, evening breathing practice. No extremes, no sudden changes. After several months, his ultrasound results did not show dramatic disappearance of plaques, but they showed something more important. No progression, improved blood flow characteristics, and more stable plaque structure. He told me something very simple. I stopped feeling like I am waiting for something bad. This is the real goal. Now let me give you another small but very powerful step that strengthens everything we have discussed. Hydration. It sounds too simple, and because of that, many people ignore it. But blood is not just a concept. It is a fluid, and its viscosity, how thick or fluid it is, directly affects how easily it moves through your vessels. With age, people often drink less water than they need. The sense of thirst becomes less pronounced. As a result, the blood can become slightly more viscous, circulation becomes less efficient, and the load on the sosudi increases. Even a mild, chronic lack of fluid can subtly worsen circulation. Tomorrow, begin to pay attention to this. Not by forcing large volumes at once, but by distributing water intake throughout the day. A glass in the morning, a glass between meals, a glass in the afternoon. Try this for 7 days. Observe your state. Many people notice clearer thinking, less fatigue, even more stable pressure, because when blood flows more easily, every system benefits. And now, as all these elements come together, nutrition, inflammation control, glucose stability, nervous system balance, hydration, we arrive at something that cannot be replaced by any single pill. We arrive at a system, and it is exactly within this system that those two products we discussed, beetroot and fatty fish, begin to reveal their true strength. Not as isolated remedies, but as parts of a coherent, supportive environment. But there is still one detail, one nuance which many people overlook even when they do everything correctly, and this detail often determines whether the result will be temporary or lasting. This is the point I promised to reveal at the very end, and it is simpler than you expect, but deeper than it seems. And now we come to the point that many people overlook, even when they seem to be doing everything correctly. They choose good products, they try to follow recommendations, they even begin to feel some improvement, and then, after a few weeks or months, everything quietly returns to the previous state. Not because the method did not work, but because one condition was missing: rhythm. Your body does not live according to isolated actions. It lives according to cycles, according to repetition, according to what it can predict. And this is especially important after 50, when the ability to quickly adapt becomes weaker and the need for stability becomes stronger. I want you to understand this very clearly. The same beetroot, the same fatty fish, the same calm breathing, the same walking after meals. All of this works not because it is correct, but because it is repeated calmly, without emotional pressure, without attempts to do everything perfectly. I have seen people try to change everything at once. They create a strict plan, they follow it for 10 days, sometimes 2 weeks, and then they stop. Not because they are weak, but because the body does not accept abrupt changes as something sustainable. And then they tell me, it didn't help. But the truth is different. It did not have time to become a pattern. There was a patient, 69 years old, a thoughtful man, not prone to extremes. When we spoke, he said something very important. I don't want to fight my body. I want to agree with it. This is exactly the approach that works. We did not introduce anything new, everything you have already heard, but we changed the way he approached it. No strict deadlines, no pressure, no attempts to be ideal, just a rhythm. Morning, a small portion of beetroot juice, not every day, but most days. During the week, fatty fish, calmly without forcing. After meals, a few minutes of movement. In the evening, quiet breathing, nothing dramatic. After 3 months, his condition was not just improved, it was stable. And stability in vascular health is more valuable than any short-term success. He told me, for the first time, I feel that my body is not resisting me. And this is the key point. Your body is not your enemy. It does not need to be forced, corrected, or controlled aggressively. It needs conditions in which it can function as it was designed to. Now, I want to give you something simple, but very honest. Do not try to remember everything at once. Do not try to change your entire life tomorrow. Choose one thing, just one. Maybe it will be the morning beetroot, maybe the evening breathing, maybe a short walk after meals. Start there. Do it for 7 days. Not perfectly, just consistently. And then, when this becomes natural, add the next element. This is how real change happens. Quietly, without stress, without internal resistance. And now, before we finish, I want you to look at this differently. Not as advice, not as a set of recommendations, but as an opportunity to return something that was gradually lost. The ability of your body to function smoothly, calmly, reliably. Time after 50 is not something to fear, but it is something to respect. And if this conversation helped you see your health more clearly, support it. Subscribe to the channel and leave a like. This allows more people to receive information that is often not spoken about openly, but can truly change quality of life. Take care of yourself not with urgency but with consistency. not with fear, but with understanding, and begin, calmly, from tomorrow.